Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs Daily War Room Update. We are on day 136 of the war with the terrorists in Gaza, and the war on the ground is continuing on. IDF forces expanding their operations all throughout Khan Yunis. Yesterday, we saw the operations in the Nasser hospital, where all types of medicines that were meant to get to Israelis that had been provided by the French a while ago were found in closed containers. Those were medicines that were meant to go to the hostages, but never arrived there. France should actually be asking itself, well, why did we deal with these terrorists in the first place? Obviously, Qatar promised later on that they would also ensure that medicines got to the hostages and that would provide proof of the medicines getting to the hostages. They never did. There are still 134 hostages being held by the terrorists in Gaza. Of them, at least 102, we believe, are still alive. 31, 32, in fact, I think we believe, are no longer alive, but we are still working to release all of the hostages and to return all of their bodies. At the same time, underneath the hospital itself, we found massive caches of arms, Iranian arms, as the IDF exposed today, were also found under the hospital. Many terrorists around and in the surrounding environments of the hospital were killed. There was fighting from the hospital itself, firing of anti-tank weapons and light ammunitions against IDF soldiers, using a hospital as a base for military operations. That's what was going on in the Nasser hospital. That's what's happening in Khan Yunis. And now we need to expand out those operations also into Rafah. We saw just a week ago 2 hostages being rescued from Rafah. There are still, we believe, the rest of the hostages being held in Rafah. There also is the Hamas headquarters. Yahya Sinwar is now held up in the tunnels, we believe, under Rafah, and all of the other heads of Hamas that are still running around in the tunnels under the Gaza Strip. Some 560 kilometers of tunnels. That's 1.5 times the London Underground. That's a huge tunnel network that existed in Gaza. Moving up to the north, the activities of Hezbollah, Iran's proxy, also in Lebanon, has continued on. More rocket fire also today. There we're talking about, as we say almost every day, the war that no one is talking about. We're talking about some over 2,000 rockets and anti-tank missiles that have been shot, direct hits to Israeli houses, some 50 to 60,000 people who have been evacuated from their homes. Today, the firing of a UAV, an unmanned aerial vehicle that crashed down into the Kinneret. A little bit more details on that we hope will come out later on, but that was the event that we saw this morning. The Houthis in the south continue on with their activities against the freedom of shipping. We've seen not a small amount of activity there as well, also from the coalition forces led by the US and the UK and other countries, other European countries involved there. As part of that explanation that I was doing last week, just trying to explain to European members of parliament that really the main effect of the Houthis' activities, closing the entrance to Bab el-Mandeb, to the Straits of Eden, and up into the Red Sea and through to the Suez Canal, the main people to be affected is Europe. They are the ones who are paying that extra price of all of the shipping having to go round the entire continent of Africa, extending the shipping lanes by 5 to 8 days, depending on where exactly in Europe they are destined to arrive. So that's on the side of the Houthis. Judea and Samaria, Israel, we've seen not a small amount of terrorist activities. And really, that's what we're going to explain and talk about a little bit more in depth today with our guest, the founder and the director of Palestinian Media Watch, Itamar Marcus. But before we start with Itamar, a little bit of statistics. In 2023, the Shabak, the Israel Security Agency, in a report that they published recently, says that there were 3,436 terror attacks. Now, they break that down into different categories, whether it was shooting attacks, whether it was bombs that were thrown, IEDs that was thrown at the forces, Molotov cocktails. all types of different terror attacks. We've seen ramming attacks, and all of those put together, 3,436 attacks. According to the ISA statistics, that was a 76% increase from the year before, from 2022, when there were 2,613 attacks. Now, in a report that Palestinian Media Watch put out just yesterday, Itamar, just yesterday, Palestinian Media Watch already detailed or gave a report on what is the PA claim that it did in Judea and Samaria. PA Fatah claimed that it did in Judea and Samaria in the year 2023. How many terrorist attacks were they involved in? How many terror attacks did they lead? How many of their people were involved in these terror attacks and were killed by IDF forces? Now, the numbers are astounding. I really have to say, at least for myself, they're astounding. But they have to be told. Of the 3,436 attack, according to the Palestinian Authority, Fatah, the moderates of Mahmoud Abbas, and the PA security forces carried out no fewer than 1,500 attacks. That's almost half of all the terror attacks in Judea and Samaria were carried out by the so-called moderates of the Palestinian Authority, by Mahmoud Abbas and the PA security forces. 63 to 65% of the terrorists killed in Judea and Samaria were members of Fatah, the PA security forces, or their children. This is the people who are involved in terror. This is what the Palestinian Authority is telling its people. This is really what they're telling the world, but only if you're listening. Because if you're not listening to what the Palestinian Authority are telling themselves, then you might possibly misunderstand and hear Secretary of State Antony Blinken talking about the possibility of a Palestinian state, a possible involvement of the Palestinian Authority and the Palestinian security forces in the day after in Gaza. Now, why would you consider that if half of all terrorist attacks are carried out by the Palestinian Authority, carried out by the PA security forces, as a question in and of itself? One of the statistics that I saw preparing for the discussion today is that in 2021, for example, the US administration provided the PA with $40 million of aid for its security forces. Now, aid, as we know, US aid to the PA is somewhat limited by the Taylor Force Act, which conditions most of the US aid to the PA on the PA cancelling its pay for slay policy, but it leaves out certain forms of aid which can still flow unhindered. One of them is for the security cooperation. And so it's about, thank you for joining us. Based on that introduction, tell us a little bit about the report that the PMW put out. How do the PA explain to themselves, to their people, the involvement of the PA security forces in acts of terror?
Thank you, Maurice. The significant thing to understand about the Palestinian Authority is all of those statistics that you just mentioned, which are in our report. Not only doesn't the Palestinian Authority try to hide their involvement in terror, they actually brag about their involvement in terror. You would think that, okay, they're involved in terror, but they're not going to tell anyone. No, this is how they present themselves to their people. They get on TV and they say, look at us. There have been numerous times in the last couple of years that Palestinian Authority leaders, let's say before October 7th, have actually mocked Hamas. They said, look how much we're doing to fight Israel. Look at our resistance. And you in the Gaza Strip just are talking. So what we've learned over the years about the Palestinian Authority is not only is terror support important for them, but it's what makes them more popular amongst their population. Now, this particular report, what we're documenting here is how many of the Palestinian Authority officers in the police forces and the security apparatus, which is funded by the West
and trained by the West,
how many of them are actually involved in terror. There was an item a couple of years ago where a Palestinian officer in the police force was caught and arrested, and he was also a member of the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades. And the Palestinian Authority itself, when they put this on TV, They actually had the heading on TV, security forces by day and self-sacrificing fighter by night. In other words, the idea of having both hats at the same time, the terrorist hat and the police officer, the official police officer, the legitimate police officer, was not a contradiction for them. It's just the way they are. And this, and as you talk now, and you mentioned the absurdity of the United States asking that Israel give over the Gaza Strip to the Palestinian Authority and let them be in charge of security, it's a farce. The security forces are deeply, deeply involved in terror. They are openly, from the officers on down, and any solution for security in the Gaza Strip has to be 100% under Israeli control. And then the civilian control has to be something else altogether, which we don't have to talk about this moment, but certainly every security. What I'm hoping, actually, is that Israel can be involved in all security control in the Gaza for a number of years. It will be successful, and then somehow that will be understood to be the model for Judea and Samaria as well, whereby somehow the Palestinian Authority security forces, which are so entrenched in terror, the world will realize that that is a major part of the problem. And the model of Gaza, where Israeli controls security, can be returned to Judea and Samaria.
So one of these things, Itamar, that it's really hard to understand. The PA says in Arabic to its population that we are leading terror. We are the ones who are at the forefront of the terror. Our security forces that are, they don't say it, but they are, open close brackets, obviously, US trained, US funded, are the ones that, and yet when you look at the polls, it doesn't seem to give the PA any greater jump in their popularity. They're still hated by the Palestinian population. So even that PR effort of saying, well, look, we're also involved in terrorism, doesn't even seem to be reaching its goal or achieving its goal. And so really they're just talking about their involvement in terrorism as a way to self-grandize, but really with no real results at the end.
The Palestinian population is judging results by action, and what we see, for example, is every time a Palestinian terrorist in Judea and Samaria is member of the Fatah, member of the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade, member of then there's a whole poster that's publicized. The whole poster goes out. The Palestinian Authority gets a little bit of boost in popularity. So that is something that they do. On the other hand, when you look at what happened on October 7th, when the PA, not just Hamas, the PA has been promoting violence and terror as proof of the way Palestinians should be running things. The Palestinians look at October 7th and say, Hamas is our God. Hamas did everything that the PA has been talking about for all these years. Hamas went and did it. So what happened on October 7th, I think, is going to solidify Hamas for many years as the leader of the Palestinian Authority in the hearts and minds and souls of the Palestinian population. No matter what Fatah says, no matter how many statistics they show out, they're going to say, you can talk big, but look what Hamas did. Let's see you do something like that.
But that means that Israel really has to complete the job and destroy Hamas, because if we leave them even a little bit of their existence, then the Palestinian people will still follow them. They'll be able to rebuild their forces, rebuild their organizational base, and really come back to life. That's really what you're saying.
Hamas is probably going to come back to life under a different name. The foundations that make Hamas popular is not just its success of October 7th. It's also the belief this is a religious war for Allah. The Jews are the enemies of Allah. The Jews are monkeys and pigs. These are things that Hamas...
These are all PA teachings, and not only Hamas teachings.
They're PA teachings that Hamas is living by. In other words, the PA still meets with Israel. The PA hasn't renounced the Oslo Accords officially yet, even though they don't abide by it. So that the Hamas is telling its people, we're living by these principles that we're telling you. The Fatah can tell you the Jews are some monkeys and pigs, and Fatah can tell you that they're Satan, and they can tell you it's a religious war for Allah. We're the ones who are living by it. They're still talking with them. They're still making deals with them. They're still making agreements with them. We're the ones. So I think Hamas is perceived as the authentic, the more pure. And when you're talking about a religious society, when you're talking about a religious war, and people who don't understand, this is first and foremost a religious war for Allah. That's how the Palestinian Authority and Hamas both present it. Hamas is seen as the one who is leading in this religious ideology, in this religious war. And Fatah has a lot of ground to catch up to present themselves as the ones who are really leading this war.
But they're not really leading the war. They're leading maybe the war of indoctrination, of education. The terrorists who carried out the October 7 massacre weren't 16-year-olds. What do I mean by that? Hamas took control of the Gaza Strip in 2006, 2007, full control. And so you would think that the people who carried out the massacre were educated under Hamas, because that's what they're teaching. But it's not. That's not the case. There were people who were educated by the PA system. These were people who were taught from the start that this is what you need to do. When we look at the pictures of the ages of the terrorists who came over and who carried out the slaughter, again, they're in their late 20s, early 30s. Some of them UNRWA social workers, and that's the age group. These are the people who grew up on the PA education under Oslo.
The reason that October 7th happened in the Gaza Strip and didn't happen in Judea and Samaria is not because the Arabs of Judea and Samaria would have less desire to do it. It's only because of the isolation that the Gaza Strip gave the Hamas military structure the ability to build the tunnels, to hide what they were doing, to plan this, to rehearse it, to practice it. It was that independence of motion. In Judea and Samaria, in the last 2 years, I would say, 3 out of 7, or maybe 5 out of 7 nights a week, Israeli forces have been going through the cities of Judea and Samaria, going after terrorists.
We had the whole period in Jenin where the IDF forces didn't go in, and that whole terror infrastructure that grew up there, and both in Nablus, in Shechem, and then in Jenin, the Lions then developed there really quite an extensive terror infrastructure.
That's exactly what I'm saying. If we were to leave the Palestinian, the Arab cities in Judea and Samaria by themselves for another year or 2 or 3, they would build up the identical terror infrastructure that Hamas has built up, and then they would attempt to do something similar throughout the cities of Judea and Samaria and across the Green Line into the official state of Israel as well. So what happened on October 7th happened in Gaza because of the ability and not because of lack of desire from the Arabs of Judea and Samaria.
And now part of this discussion that's going on in the international community, you discussed it also in the report, is that the call to set up a Palestinian state. So if we have a Palestinian state that's created, all of this talk of a demilitarized Palestinian state, really there's no way to enforce that. What you're describing is that Judea and Samaria, what they would say is the Palestinian state, will basically become a massive terror zone for developing terror capabilities and then for attacking Israel.
That's absolutely the case. The Palestinian state will be suicidal for Israel. Look at the Oslo Accords. After the territories that we gave to the Palestinian Authority after the signing of the Oslo Accords, the Israeli leadership was hesitant to go in there because they wanted to recognize the integrity of the Palestinian Authority, even though they weren't a state. And during those couple of years before the year 2000, look at the terror infrastructure that they managed to build in just a few years. And Israel lost 1,100, 1,200 people in their terror war, what they call Intifada. And they had just a couple of years to build up that terror infrastructure.
Really, lots more people were murdered as a result of Palestinian terrorism since the Oslo Accords than ever before.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it all happened because Israel gave them the independence to move around. And that was without even having a state, that's without even having an airport, without even having, could you imagine, we're going to give them 3 years of independence. What's going to come in on their airplanes? They're going to have independence in Gaza, and they're going to be shipping in who knows what kind of weapons into Gaza.
From Iran, from North Korea, as we've seen already now.
Imagine we know that once October 7th started, most of the airlines, almost all the airlines in the world, completely stopped traveling to Israel. And only now are some of them really coming back, and some of them haven't come at all. Some major airlines, United Airlines hasn't yet flown back to Israel, and many have not. Could you imagine if we had attacks on the airport, not from the distance of Gaza, but from 7 kilometers away? This Palestinian Authority state could absolutely cut Israel off from the entire world. And they would blame, okay, we didn't really do it. It was some terrorists who did it. It doesn't really matter. They could absolutely cripple Israel economically, tourist-wise, if we were to take this gamble of a Palestinian state.
That's what we've described a number of times on the program, is that the Gazan terrorists traveled 21 kilometers to their furthest point from Gaza to Netivot. If you take Israel at its thinnest area, it's only 12 kilometers long. So basically, you can come out of Kalkilia, walk that distance as the Palestinian terrorists en masse, cut Israel in half, move up and down, and then you've got that whole mountain ridge that then controls the entire coastal plain. Ben Gurion is shut down. There's no commerce. There's nothing is going on. Even the ports that are a huge source of goods and everything coming into the country, they're under fire. They're controlled by the terrorists. So how does this discussion even develop? How does anyone even think about creating a Palestinian state there?
The Palestinian Authority, the main part of Palestinian Authority ideology is victimhood. And for the Palestinian Authority, October 7th is ancient history. October 8th is modern history. That's current history from October 8th till today. And the entire October 8th until today, they have been victims. And they've convinced the world that they're victims. And what they're saying to the world is, we are victims, we have our rights, just give us our rights, and that's the end of terror. And the world, the naive Western world, would love to have the end of this conflict. I think some of them would also love to have the end of Israel, but the ones who aren't in their heart anti-Israel, they'd love to have the end of this conflict. And they say, okay, just give them what they want. They're suffering so much, 30,000 people killed. Let's just do it. Give them what they want. And you've got some well-meaning people who are naive, who don't have any understanding of what would happen were Israel to be attacked by a population like this. So, when you talk about Israel being attacked at its narrowest point, where it's 7 kilometers wide, 12 kilometers wide. Everyone's complaining, why didn't Israel have its army along Gaza? Well, those 12 kilometers, you'd have to use up 3 kilometers to start basing an army there. What, is Israel going to have an army across the entire borders there? We're going to start putting tanks and regiments in
350 kilometers of border, as it were,
exactly,
with Judea and Samaria.
So it's absolutely impossible. And the final thing on this I want to point out is, so they say it's going to be demilitarized. Let me just remind the viewers that Lebanon, the demilitarized Lebanon now has 200,000 missiles aimed at Israel, many of them precision missiles, and this is demilitarized. So we know that the concept of demilitarized is a joke, it's a farce, and anyone in the international community who says that there's going to be a state and it will remain demilitarized is just either talking willful blindness, or again, it's maybe that other part of the population that really doesn't like Israel and would love to see Israel hit by 50,000 bombs.
And really, that's the discussion that appears to be going on even today as we sit here. There is a hearing going on in the ICJ, in the International Court of Justice, where it was exactly the position expressed by the PA Foreign Minister today in the court. We are victims of the 8th of October. It's as if nothing else happened beforehand. It's like when the PA joined the International Court of Criminal Court, and they said that they would like to apply the jurisdiction from the 13th of June, 2014, because the day before they kidnapped and murdered 3 kids, and that brought on a result everything starts the day after. Everything starts on the next day. It's almost as if it's irrelevant. And today they're discussing in today the discussion in the ICJ is the request for an advisory opinion on the legal consequences of the continued Israeli occupation of the Palestinian territories. Now, we wrote an article about this just about a week and a half ago. It's called The Debacle that's coming up in the ICJ. There you will see a map. I don't know, Daniel, is it possible to maybe get the map coming up in the background? A new map that really shows, you know, that Mahmoud Abbas has the famous map that he shows up of the diminishing Palestinian control over areas in Palestine, as he says, and he shows really how the Palestinians controlled everything, and then over the years it's been dwindling and dwindling and dwindling. So the map that we created really shows the real truth about the development of control in this area from the Ottoman period through the British Mandate period, through 1948, 1967, when Gaza was controlled by Egypt, Judea and Samaria was controlled by Jordan, when they called it for the first time the West Bank, and then that development when they could have created a Palestinian state, but they didn't, and the fact that between 1948 and 1967 there wasn't one resolution in the UN at any stage calling for Jordan to retreat or Egypt to retreat. No one ever called them the Palestinian territories in inverted commas. When did they become the Palestinian territories? When Israel liberated them from the Jordanians. And that's what they're discussing today. This gives that legitimacy also to the Palestinian claim that all of these areas are Palestinian territories. How, if at all, has the Palestinian Authority been talking about these efforts? This is an effort that they started already in the UN a year and a half ago, in 2022. What are they presenting as part of that narrative to the world? Where does the Palestinian territories in their argument start and finish?
Yeah. So one of the important things to understand is for the Palestinian Authority, for their population, the occupation started in 1948. They make no, they don't hide this. I think Mahmoud al-Abbas, who's Abbas's advisor on Islam, he even said, he said it very clearly. He said, you know why October 7th happened? It happened because of the occupation that we've been under for more than 7 decades.
Yeah.
And he said, if Israel wants to have, if the Jews want to have peace and security, they have to stop the occupation. So what we have to understand is the Palestinian Authority internal narrative is that Israel has no right to exist in any borders. The person who said this most clearly was a Palestinian Authority senior official. His name is Abbas Zaki, who was being interviewed on television in Al Jazeera, actually. And he said, our goal, the president's goal, he said, Abbas's goal is Palestine from the river to the sea, all of Palestine. But we have a political plan, he says, that we talk about the 1967 borders. Why? Then he answered, because everybody knows Israel can't survive those borders.
Right.
And that's the Palestinian idea. That's why they talk about those borders.
That's
because
the plan of stages.
They know, and because look, if we just talk about what we just described a few minutes ago, you put an independent state over there with the ability to close Israel down at any time they want to, with a couple of missiles and attacks, and that's why Israel can't survive those borders. And the international community has to understand, and I think the Israeli leaders have to say this every day. We cannot survive those borders. Stop talking about them. And it can't just come from the Likud. Leaders like Benny Gantz, Eisenkot, they have to understand this as well. They have to say this as well. Leave it to Meretz and Labor to talk about those old 1967 ceasefire lines, but the rest of them have to say Israel cannot survive those borders. We are quoting the Palestinian Authority. We can't survive those borders. Let's talk about something completely different, and that has to be the narrative forward from today on.
There really has been one of the subjects that we've been discussing extensively here at the JCPA. Also, this idea of defensible borders. Where can Israel place its borders? The importance of the Jordan Valley. Quoting Yitzhak Rabin from his presentation almost of the Oslo Accords that he gave on the 5th of October, 1995, the Oslo Accords, the second part of the Oslo Accords, just for our audience, was signed on the 29th of September. Yitzhak Rabin, in a speech before the Knesset, presented his idea of what it would look like, what he thought, or what he believed that the Accords entailed. And he said, A, no Palestinian state. B, Israel would always continue to control the Jordan Valley, in the understanding that these are our only defensible borders. We cannot allow any other closer border to come about, because that would mean the destruction of Israel. That's really the two sides of the same coin. Abbas Zaki saying, well, if we take the 67 borders, which they aren't borders, they're the armistice lines from 1949, and then we'll be able to destroy Israel. And Yitzhak Rabin, so integrally a part of the Oslo process, saying that we never agreed to that. We never agreed to give up on the Jordan Valley. Those two things don't really go together. So how do you... Did the Palestinians mislead us? Did we mislead them? What was the story?
I think everybody, of course, sees the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin as a tragedy on the personal level, on the national level. I think one of the tragedies that people don't talk about is his ideology was hijacked. I would say it was twisted, and they created a new Yitzhak Rabin. The left in Israel created a new Yitzhak Rabin. Yitzhak Rabin, his family members said it after he was killed, that he was considering stopping the Oslo Accords before the coming elections. He had recognized that he was duped by Yasser Arafat. He recognized that he made a mistake. This was Yitzhak Rabin. He was a person who believed in Israel, who believed in Israel's security. He was willing to gamble for peace. But when he recognized, according to his family, when he recognized that he made a big mistake in trusting Arafat, he was considering stopping the Oslo Accords, period. And that's where, when you talk about him saying that our security border always had to be the Jordan Valley, along the river, the Jordan River, that's clear, because he wasn't willing to. He didn't think this would endanger Israel's survival. He wasn't signing the Oslo Accords to endanger. When he realized that it did, he was considering stopping the whole process. He was killed, and the tragedy is that the radical left, led by Shimon Peres at the time and then taken over after him, has turned around his legacy. They've turned him into this person who was talking about the going back to the pre-1967 ceasefire lines, and that's one of the great tragedies. It's the next prime minister, who was Netanyahu, he wasn't able to cancel Oslo. The only one who could have canceled Oslo was Yitzhak Rabin. And again, the tragedy on the national level of his being killed is, if he was really planning on canceling Oslo, all of the tragedies, all of October 7th, Intifada, everything that's happened since then could have never happened had the person who made the mistake stood up and said, I made a mistake, we're going back to the way it was beforehand. And that's, I say, one of the great tragedies of his being killed, beyond the tragedy of the prime minister and his family, etc., which was a tragedy in and of itself.
So one of the things, just on a tangent from that, Itamar, that's being discussed now, and we've seen the discussions. Mahmoud Abbas is at the moment in Qatar. PA leaders, again, open brackets, seem to enjoy freedom of travel around the world. Abbas is in Qatar. The PA Prime Minister, Mahmoud Ashtea, is now in Germany, in Munich, at a security conference. Like, I kid you not. The PA Prime Minister that pays salaries to terrorists to murder Jews, sends his security forces to carry out terror attacks, is now in a security conference in Munich. And the discussion that's going on now in Qatar and with Abbas is this idea of bringing Hamas into the fold of the PLO. How does that work? How are they different? I apologize if our audience possibly knows some of the minutiae of these things, but I think it needs to be explained who the PLO is, who runs the PLO, what are the factions in the PLO. What does it mean bringing Hamas into the PLO? Are they not part of the PLO already?
So the PLO, of course, is the umbrella organization the administrative branch of the PLO is the Palestinian Authority, and that was the Palestinian Authority was supposed to be an Palestinian interim authority that was supposed to last. The Palestinian National Authority was supposed to be an interim authority for 5 years, after which there would be some kind of a permanent settlement. Of course, that never happened, and the Palestinian Authority has turned into its own government and has essentially replaced the PLO, and the world sees the Palestinian Authority as the voice of the Palestinian population, the Palestinian people today. Why does the PA want their bitter enemy Hamas? Let's not forget that wasn't so many years ago that Hamas was throwing Palestinian Authority officials and Fatah officials off the rooftops and murdering them. And if they had the ability in Judea and Samaria, they would have a revolution there as well tomorrow. If Israel wouldn't be stopping it, that's what would be happening. So why does the PA want to invite Hamas, and why is Hamas actually considering going with the PA? And here we have an incredible marriage of convenience. They hate each other, but Hamas, who'd like to rule because they have the support of 90% of the population, they can never get international recognition. They can never get international money. They can never get international funding. So Hamas can't be the front. Fatah can be the front. Fatah gets international funding. They have international recognition. The Palestinian Authority is accepted by the world in spite of their immoral behavior and their unethical behavior and their terrorist support, but they're respected. So what you're going to have is Palestinian Authority, Fatah needs Hamas to bring the people behind them. Hamas needs the Palestinian Authority to put the mask on Hamas. And this is the marriage of convenience between these two enemies that really have a lot of disdain and hatred for each other, for the necessity of getting international funding as well as getting support of the people. Hamas and the PA have to create this hybrid and tell the world tell the people we are united. Let's go on forward together.
So bringing them into the fold really is, as you said, it's a marriage of convenience. It's a way to dupe the world into thinking that, well, now these people are maybe going to be a little bit less aggressive. But really, Fatah is carrying out the same terrorist attacks, half of all the terrorist attacks in Judea and Samaria. So they claimed last year, and Hamas is a terrorist organization that would come under the umbrella of the PLO. That's something that we haven't seen before. That's something the PLO already has. The PFLP, it's a rejectionist organization. It's a terrorist organization. It remains a terrorist organization that's still part of the PLO. But really, we haven't seen tremendous moves for Hamas to go in there. That would really keep Hamas alive. That's throwing them like really the safety valve that's going to keep them afloat.
Yes, the Hamas, because they're primarily a religious organization, as opposed to Fatah, which is driven by religion, the Hamas in its essence. Hamas is an acronym for Islamic Resistance Movement. Islam doesn't even have the word Palestinian in the name. They are the Islamic Resistance Movement. Their belief in Islam is that they cannot recognize another sovereign over what they call Palestine, over any part of Israel. And therefore, they felt a religious problem. A religious problem. We cannot, even on paper, pretend to be accepting Israel's existence, as the PLO did. Pretended to accept Israel's, and that was their problem all along joining the PLO. They refused to say we accept Israel because that is an affront to Islam. It's an affront to the Quran. It's an affront to everything that we believe in. Now they might be considering doing this because it's that or it's disappearing. Hamas will be destroyed in the Gaza Strip, and if they don't take that, as you say, the safety belt, the safety ring from the PLO, they're going to disappear.
But now if they go into the PLO, obviously they're not going to give up on their ideology. They're not going to suddenly cheetah doesn't change its spots, as they say. They're not suddenly going to become friendly. They're not going to be agreeable. And so how can it be that the PLO that signed the Oslo Accords, Mahmoud Abbas also as the head of the PLO, is even considering bringing in this genocidal terrorist group under that umbrella?
Like I said before, he's doing it only out of total necessity. If he comes to the population and say, we, PA, PLO, are going to rule Gaza Strip or Judea, Samaria, and Hamas's history, forget it. Even before October 7th, he had 80% of the population wanting him to resign, 75% wanted elections. Now it's 90%. He has no support. So he, like I said, it's a marriage, it's a forced marriage. He doesn't want them. He knows they're lying. They know they're lying. I think all the negotiations that are happening right now are exactly how to word the agreement so that Hamas can both be able to tell its people, we never really accepted Israel's existence, and the PA will be able to tell the international community they did accept Israel's existence, that they're trying to work out a language that everybody can interpret in their own way.
Do they honestly believe that the international community is that stupid? That the US administration isn't capable of seeing that any integration of Hamas into the PLO is really changing the nature even further towards fanaticism of that organization, and it's something which shouldn't be tolerated at all?
Well, Mohammed Shtayyeh, the prime minister in Europe now at that security conference, and he told them what the conditions were for Hamas to join. He said they have to adopt our political agenda. What he's telling them is just what you said before is impossible. This tiger is going to erase its stripes, change its stripes. This leopard is going to change its spots. And that's what we're waiting for. We are going to be the leaders of the Palestinian people. We are going to force Hamas to accept our view of the world. They will accept our position regarding resistance. In other words, he went through all the issues. And once they do all that, we can have them. So what I'm saying is, in order to satisfy, and he says this openly at an international forum, that we're going to take Hamas in after they accept these things. So they have to create a wording where Hamas can accept these things, but tell its people that it didn't accept them. And that's why they need some good Talmud scholars to work out a language that everybody can interpret.
Lawyers.
Lawyers. to work out a language where everybody can say, oh, yes, we did it our way. And they'll say, we did it our way. And the Western world is so anxious to have a Palestinian population or a leadership to work with. They're going to celebrate and bring out
they
the
will
champion.
embrace
Yes.
Ismail Haniya.
Absolutely.
They will embrace Abu Marzouk. They were and Khaled Mashal. Is that what we're going to see, this legitimization of Hamas once they're brought into that fold with the, as it were, we really accept these new ideas of peace and tolerance?
I think there'll be new people there. I don't believe the international community will accept Marzouk, and they won't accept Ismail Haniya. And the same way they won't accept
Sinwar.
Yeah. So they're not going to accept these people who were the leaders of what happened on October 7th, but they're people just down below, and these people will step aside, and what will happen is these people, the leadership will be pulling the strings, and there'll be other faces, and there'll be new faces, people who haven't officially been recognized as having been involved in terror, certainly not involved in October 7th. And those are the faces that we're going to see of Hamas. We hear this language when they talk about technocrats. So what does a technocrat mean? To me, there's a Hamasnik who also went to university and has a degree in economics, and he was never an active Hamasnik, but and they'll put him in some position and they'll say, here, he's not connected to the military wing of Hamas. He's a political organization. And so that's what's going to happen. These are the people that are going to be the new face of Hamas, and the strings will probably be pulled by the other people from behind the scenes.
This will be the new face of the technocrat government. Yes. of the PA.
Yes.
So they're talking about also deposing Mahmoud Abbas, getting rid of Shtayyeh and replacing him with these at the moment unknowns. That's what we're going to see. And how does he think that the Palestinian people will respond to that? They'll be supportive. They'll be they've given up on the idea of democracy. Whatever there is in the Palestinian Authority. The West has given up on democracy. There's never going to be elections again in the PA. Is that what we're talking about?
So the people might actually accept this because the people, whereas they love and they adopt and they accept the Hamas ideology, a lot of them recognize that this leadership brought a major tragedy on the Gaza Strip. It's flattened right now. The Palestinian Authority leadership, they despise and they loathe because of their corruption all the years. They're not having election all these years, stealing money all these years. So they'll be very happy to have technocrats. Now, there are people in the Palestinian Authority, people who might be business leaders who have never been known for corruption, people who built some of these major, shopping centers and major, people who, get a couple of those people who have a decent reputation amongst the Palestinian population and put them in position. We have a prime minister now who was never involved in terror. So that'll be acceptable to the West. They were economically successful. They'll be acceptable to the Palestinians. And like I said, the people behind the scenes pulling the strings are going to be the Fatah leadership and the Hamas leadership, but they will be faces. This is what the Palestinian Authority is trying to create. People who both be accepted by their people, accepted by the international community, and of course, it's all a facade.
So one of the comments that we have from our audience, from Barbara Mazor, is that there are Palestinians who want to live want to live side by side with us, and that we certainly know. There's this whole group of people that we're also engaging with and discussing with about the project for the day after in Gaza, on all different levels. I know that you've had not a small amount of discussions with Palestinians themselves, and this idea of what do we do with them? What do we do with these people who want a different future, want to see something else, but really we're forcing on them the Palestinian Authority, we're forcing on them Hamas, we're forcing on them the PLO. It seems to be that you're saying that those voices will never be heard. They will never be able to stand up and say, you know what, we want to decide our own future.
I'll tell you two interesting comments made by a Palestinian as I was meeting European members of parliament here in somewhere in Judea, in a place that he could get to. He's a Palestinian from a refugee camp. He's worked with Palestinian Media Watch a number of times. And he was describing, after I made a presentation showing the Palestinian world of the hatred and what's going on, he said, yes, I was brought up with that ideology. He spoke and he described how he really believed the Jews were all this evil. He really believed every Israeli wanted to kill Palestinians. He really, really believed this. And then he went and described how he eventually got to meet Israelis, learn Israelis, and then he had his wow moment and he realized that his whole life had been a lie under the Palestinian Authority. And now he works for peace. He really wants peace with Israelis. And so they asked him, how many Palestinians agree with you, have this ideology? And he said, I have no idea. I'm afraid to tell people that I want peace with Israelis because I'll end up in a Palestinian Authority jail and I'll be tortured if I ever get out. That's what he answered to them. They were shocked. And so then they asked him another question. Maybe would it be better if there were a Palestinian state? Maybe all the hatred will go away. And then he said to them, please don't force a Palestinian state on us, on the Palestinians with this leadership, because I could never live in that kind of a state. So you're asking, what about these people? These people who really do want to have peace, people who live next to, some of them have been in touch with what they call settlers, residents of Judea and Samaria. For many, many years, they know that we don't want to hurt them, we don't want to fight them, we don't want to kill them, we want what's good for them and good for us. These people do want peace, but they can't talk about it. They're afraid to talk about it. They literally could be thrown in jail for talking about peace with this number one enemy, Jews, who are also quote unquote settlers. So that's the great challenge here. Those people, will these technocrats be an answer for them? I don't think so. The technocrats are going to, the Hamas leadership, PA leadership, Fatah leadership, the technocrats are going to be the mask. They're going to be the facade. The strings are still going to be pulled by these other people. The world will be happy because they've created something that they think is serious. The Palestinian population will be happy for a while, but people who want peace and want to live in peace with Israelis, they're not going to be happy.
That's really a bleak prediction, Itamar. I think it's come up on a number of occasions also in our discussions with our Palestinian partners, saying that firstly, without the destruction of Hamas, there's nothing to talk about as an alternative in the Gaza Strip. If Hamas is allowed to survive, then they will destroy any type of other voice in Gaza. And the same with the PA, unfortunately. Once the PA remains in control and maintains this massive security apparatus funded by the US, funded by the European Union, that's really so integrally involved in terrorism. Just to bring it back to the start of our discussion, there is no opportunity for alternative voices to be heard. And that's something I think which is particularly sad, because there do seem to be not a small amount of alternative voices.
Like I said, he's afraid. He has no idea what percentage of the population. When I talked to him about what he believed before he had his wow moment, before he started meeting Israelis, you have to talk to people like this and to get a sense of how deeply they fear Israelis. One of the main parts of the indoctrination of Palestinian population and youth by the leadership is that Israelis really want to kill them. It's not just that we're Satan, we're acting like Satan. We want the worst for them. We're using every opportunity to kill them. And if you're alone in a situation where they have an opportunity, they're going to do it. Palestinians really believe this. In other words, I almost don't blame the Palestinian population for hating Israelis, because they really believe that we want to kill them. They really do believe it. And that's got to be the trick for creating a peaceful population living beside us. Erase this poison. When I had a press conference in 2007 with Hillary Clinton in the Senate, we were releasing Palestinian Media Watch report on Palestinian school books. She went through the material, she went through the report, and I made my presentation, and she summarized, and she said the Palestinians are profoundly poisoning the minds of their children.
Yeah.
That was 2007. All of those children brought up with these messages are what I call today
the October 7 massacre.
They are the poison generation. Today, we are facing the poison generation. And the only way you get rid of poison is by detoxifying them. The poison is literally in their system. They really believe this. We need detoxification. This is a process for many years. A couple of technocrats that are being pulled by Hamas and Fatah is not going to make it.
So I have to, as we wrap up, because our time is finished, I want to give you a little bit of an alternative idea on that. One of our Palestinian interlocutors, we were discussing with him, why haven't the Gazans breached the fence with Egypt and sought refuge there? Why has that not happened? You're talking about millions, 1.5 million people, according to the UN, that are in Rafah. Why are they sitting there so disciplined on the border? And his answer was very simple. He said, whilst the Palestinians are taught that Israelis may want to kill them, they would sooner run out of Gaza into Israel than they would into Egypt. Because whilst they're taught and they may believe that Israel wants to kill them, they 100% know that if they breach the fence into Egypt, they will be killed. That's not a question. So that was one of the things that we were told. As we do, as I try to do Itamar on these programs, unfortunately, some of the content is a little bit harsh and doesn't present a great picture. One positive note going forward.
Positive note going forward. Okay, that's a challenging one. The positive note is the following. Forget what the international community wants. Gaza, because it was flattened, and it will have no leadership, it will have no Palestinian Authority leadership, it will have no Hamas leadership in the future. It gives the opportunity, and it has no United Nations infrastructures. It gives an opportunity to build something up from zero. We don't have to change, we don't have to erase, we don't have to push anyone out of power. We can start from scratch and build up from the bottom. And Gaza, therefore, allows an opportunity. Let's build it up. I say let's, the international community, the Europeans, the Americans, use the money, build it up. Don't build any refugee camps. Everybody there is a refugee now. Build up housing, build up industry, build up jobs for everybody. Do this from scratch. Any money that comes through will not go through the UN. It'll go through some kind of new mechanism that'll be set up, the Gaza renovation mechanism. Call it that. We get rid of the UN, we get rid of the PA, we get rid of Hamas, build up something from scratch, have education controlled by the international community. The school books run together, and I say the Westerners, together with some of the Abraham Accords countries who have fixed their school books, who have changed their ideology. Put them together, create this, and then 10 years' time, what we might have is a model of a population that grew up on the idea of coexistence with Israel, security under Israel. Their lives will be much better than it ever was under Hamas. And then that can be the model even for Judea and Samaria.
It's denazified Germany after the war,
That's right.
happening also in the Gaza Strip. really, as you said, this is a once, really in a century opportunity in Gaza.
Exactly.
Also to take in Gaza, they say that there are 1.5 million refugees. UNRWA is a whole different subject. Maybe it's the chance for these 1.5 million people to finally get the opportunity to settle down and to get out of that cycle of poverty, of dependence that UNRWA has kept them in, that the PA has kept them in, that the Arab countries have kept them in, and that the Europeans and also the Westerners have kept them in for 75 years. Unfortunately, Itamar, our time has ended. Thank you to our audience for joining us. We will be back with you again tomorrow at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. For those that were asking, you can find the report that I mentioned that we put out from the JCPA for the ICJ hearing on our site under the title of "Preparing for the debacle of the International Court of Justice," and you can find the report of Palestinian Media Watch on PMW sites. Terrorists in Uniform. That's what it's called. Look up Terrorists in Uniform on the side of Palestinian Media Watch, and there you'll be able to find those two reports. Really critical for everything that's going on. The discussions in the ICJ will be continuing on for another 5 days, and we're going to see this massive onslaught against Israel. So there we have information that will be able to help all of you to push back, even on social media, wherever you are. Get the information. There it is. And so we will see you again tomorrow. Thank you very much for joining us. Have a good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are.